Okay, everyone, if you want to start settling down, sitting to get the panel started. Get some people. All right. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's really exciting to see all of you here on a Wednesday. I know there's a lot of things that you could be doing, especially going home and resting after a day of work. My name is Nancy. I'm a customer success manager here at Remind. And I think about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, when I was looking for a job in tech, I was a little overwhelmed because I was like, I really want to work for a mission-driven company, but where do I start? How do I find one? You know, what's that process like? So I'm really excited that I found Remind. I'm really happy to be with them. And I'm excited to have an event like this where we can all get together with like-minded people and learn about other companies doing really amazing things. So again, thank you so much for being here. So one other thing I wanted to mention, those that are exploring opportunities to work at Remind or any of the companies here, please feel free to stick around afterwards. We'll be networking. We'll have representatives from the company open to chat about the opportunities that are available. And a few other quick housekeeping things. If you need to use a restroom, it's up here to the left. And then in case of an emergency, we'll all leave from the door that we entered at, and there's stairs to the right of the elevator. All right. So before we start drilling them with questions, allow me to briefly introduce who's in the room with us today. So Daniel Jin Yu is a co-founder and CEO of Goalbook. Daniel was a special education teacher and district administrator at Ravenswood City School District in East Palo Alto. Daniel studied electrical engineering and computer science at UC Berkeley and received his general and special education teaching credentials from Cal State East Bay. Alex Lawson is the founder of Landed, a proud product of Bellevue Public Schools in his native Washington State. Alex holds a BA from Northwestern University and an MBA from the Stanford Graduate School of Business. He's worked as a member of Barack Obama's field team in 2007 and 2008, and then served as a founding regional director of Obama for America until 2010. Alex has served in leadership positions at numerous social enterprises and technology startups in DC, London, and San Francisco. Alex got his start in a real estate as a developer in Forest City. He resides in San Francisco with his husband and spends his decompression time outdoors, on the dance floor, or playing the fun uncle role. Me too, for auntie, but yes. All right, so next up is Preston Silverman. He's the CEO and co-founder of RaiseMe. Preston taught history and economics at Shanti Bhavan School in India. Previously, Preston served as a director of Asia Pacific at Frontier Strategy Group, a strategy consultancy focused on developing countries. And Brian Gray is president and CEO of Remind. Prior to joining Remind, Brian served as CEO at Bleacher Report, which was successfully sold to Time Warner in August 2012. A veteran leader in digital media, Brian previously held senior executive positions at Fox Sports, Yahoo, Shutterfly, AOL Netscape. He lives in San Francisco with his wife, Paige, and they have 2 daughters, Zelly and Ava. All right, so now I'll have a lovely moderator, Leanne, introduce herself, the topic of the night, and lead the panelists into our burning questions.
Great. Hi, everyone. I was telling my team earlier, the last time I did public speaking was in front of high schoolers. So this is very different. But thank you for joining us. I'm super excited that you are all here at Remind tonight. As Nancy mentioned, my name's Leanne, and I work as a customer success manager here at Remind. I've been here for over a year, and so in this role, I get to work with a ton of schools and districts across the country. So I meet superintendents, principals, teachers all day, every day, talking to them about how to improve communications in their community. I actually found out about Remind when I was a high school teacher in New York. When it first came out in 2011, a lot of my students were not waking up on time to come to school. So I found out about this app, so that I could text them. They would not have my number, so that was very convenient. So prior, as I mentioned, to my role here, I was a high school teacher, administrator, and I was a student in K-12 and higher ed orgs. And so that all the folks that I have sitting next to me tonight are all leaders of companies that provide services for roles that are deeply personal to me. So I feel very connected to what we're going to be talking about here tonight. So our topic of the night is one company, two goals. So how mission-driven companies achieve sustainable impact. And this is something we constantly think about at Remind every day. And we're trying to figure out how two seemingly opposite goals can coexist with one another. And so the folks next to me this evening will take the time to define, explain, and dive into what it means to be mission-driven and also achieve profitability. So without further ado, we're going to dive into the first question, and our panelists will feel free to answer to the audience. And so the first question is, why did you choose to go into this industry, and why your company in particular, and why the mission?
I guess I have a microphone. I could start. And before I start, I need to put in a couple plugs. First off, to Nancy, to Leanne, and to Kate, our VP of People Ops, who were the brainstorm behind putting this together, this series together. This is the inaugural one. They're members of our working group of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so thank you guys for taking the time to pull this together. Also, I want to thank them. This originally was going to just be three folks, the three folks to my left, but I was able to find another one of these chairs, and so they had to invite me and include me. So otherwise I wouldn't have been here. So the answer to that question, as Nancy shared, my background is not in education technology or education as a business, although it's the family business. And by that, I mean, I grew up in rural Oregon, the son of two school teachers. My dad taught high school for 30 years. My mom taught kindergarten for 25. My sister just is about to start her 26th year teaching middle school. So it's what I grew up kind of knowing in the conversations that we had around the table. And I, having been in California for many years, kind of lost track of the fact that I also grew up in a pretty kind of left of the center distribution curve socioeconomic part of this country. Rural Oregon, one street light, logging community. A lot of my classmates didn't leave the community to go on to something called higher education. So when I kind of jumped out of the media business, took a little bit of break, and decided, okay, if I'm going to go do this important role of CEO in a startup, I'm going to do it in either health or education. And so I was fortunate enough to come across Remind in the spring of 2016 when Brett and David and the board kind of came to the decision to think about bringing in a new CEO. And I was fortunate enough to be the one that they decided to kind of let come into the company and help us kind of move forward and speak to some of the other questions that Leanne and Nancy have so thoughtfully pulled together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you all for having me. Really excited to be here. So our mission at RaiseMe is all about empowering all students to discover and realize their college ambitions. This is something that I'm really passionate about based on my experience teaching high school students, but also just because I believe that education is foundational to solving a lot of the problems that we face as a civilization. And if we're going to keep equal access to opportunity, keep the American dream alive, it's really critical that we figure out how do we democratize access to education. And so that's had the initial idea behind RaiseMe while I was teaching high school juniors and seniors, and I was fortunate to get a lot of feedback and from other folks that it's been even longer in the education realm, and decided to launch the company at that point.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you again for having me. Really honored to be here. My name is Alex, one of co-founders of Landed. We're on a mission to help essential professionals, starting with educators, build financial security so they can commit to the communities that they serve and are a part of. So we're a little bit adjacent, I guess, if you will, to ed tech. Obviously, very passionate about supporting educators and the impact they have in classrooms, but a lot of our work is focused day to day on what happens after they leave the classroom, like what happens to the roof over their head. I got into this work. My mom was a fourth grade school teacher. Dad is a social worker, grew up outside of Seattle, Washington. I won the lottery on love and support. I was raised by a village, aunts, uncles, a whole bunch of people. So one, I learned from that, that when nobody does anything alone, and it actually takes different people with different resources to come together to create something, create a great family, I guess. But another thing I learned from that is that money was always tight. The money was always tight. It would govern everything we talked about. It was very, very limiting, especially in places that get more and more expensive, like urban environments. And it wasn't until my grandmother passed away did my family experience the first example of intergenerational wealth being transferred. Home that she lived in passed on to my parents. And that was a financial bedrock to allow me to go to the schools I went to, and my parents became kind of a center for our extended family when things got rough for people financially. So that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. And the reality is that for most people in this country, especially in expensive places, the only way they get onto that ladder of wealth building and that sense of security, especially with their housing, is if they have a parent, mom and dad, who the bank of mom and dad will help them start out, or somebody passes along a home. And so trying to figure out how there can be alternatives to that. What are ways in which you can build a set of tools that help people be more financially secure? So our primary product at Landed is a down payment assistance product that offers help upfront for down payment in exchange for some of the value of the home in the future. And the other thing that really taught me about this work is how valuable it is to organize different resources. The Obama campaign was a very special time in history, but for me, especially as a young kid, just trying to pull together different pieces of people with different resources together to make that thing happen. That's what we try to do at Landed. We pull investors together alongside real estate agents, banks, educators, et cetera. Our job is to coordinate all of that. And then we have a business model that keeps us going. I'm happy to talk about that later on.
Thanks, Remind team, for having me here. I'm also joined by my colleague, Purva. She leads our recruiting team. I think she's taking my picture right now.
Yes.
Thanks, Purva.
Portrait.
But yeah, it's an honor to be here and an honor chance to talk with you. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of great and difficult questions probably asked later. But for me, I taught middle school. I was a special educator. And I tell folks that I think what started me on this path actually is that I was a pretty ineffective teacher, actually. It wasn't for, lack of intent or effort, but it was really a struggle for me. I really learned that kids are much more complex than computers, which is what I was comfortable with before I became a teacher. But I felt so fortunate, even during that time, I was really struggling, that I was really surrounded by just the most amazing teachers at my school. I mean, I spent half of my time being totally envious and jealous of them, and the other half really admiring what they could do, not just in a classroom, but our whole school. And then even it bled over into the community outside of the school too, for some of them. And I think I realized, both for my own sense of fulfillment, I felt more rewarded when I had the opportunity to help them, just do something they did a little bit easier or better. And kind of out of necessity, I just felt like that was probably the only thing I could do well at my school. And so that, I think, is what kind of started. I didn't have the idea for what we're doing now at Goalbook, but our vision for our company is that we empower educators to transform instruction so that all students succeed. And so that empower educators part, for me, at least, kind of comes from, I think, a lot of that experience.
Great. Thank you all for sharing. So a lot of connections to personal life, education, family. So we're going to take a little bit of a turn into some of the tougher and juicier questions. We're going to talk about funding. So going back to, mission, easy, funding. It's no mystery that funding for startups is hard, period. And given that all of our companies don't solely exist just to build profit, conveying a compelling story for funding is an even much more challenging task. So I'm going to take a dive into some questions to hear from you all about navigating some of these nuances. And so my first question, and I'll let whoever is brave enough tackle this one. What have been the funding models you have considered and why? And if you can, describe your business model and share some of the pros and cons of choosing this model.
All right. I guess I'm first.
You have the mic, so I guess.
Well, I think for us, I'm not sure. I can't speak to everyone's business here, which I'm looking forward to hearing from. But I think ours is kind of very simple. We sell software and services to school districts in the U.S. public education system. And from a business model perspective, it's very traditional, what we do. And I would say that we kind of fell into this. So I'm happy to answer more questions either during or after, but when we came out of Imagine K-12, we were part of the kind of an inaugural cohort, part of which Remind was a part of too, actually. And, you know, the default thing in my mind was you go and you raise money from the best investors you can in Silicon Valley. And kind of like, I think with what I shared about teaching is that we were very much on that mindset. What we discovered, though, is that we did not have the actual startup that was going to be able to accomplish raising money from the top investors of Silicon Valley, just the numbers, growth, you know, by any metric. We were not convincing people to invest in us. And in hindsight, I think that was actually, we kind of lucked into what was the best for our particular work and our particular company, which is that the work we do has to kind of sustain itself at a given district for a long time, and it needs a lot of support from not just teachers, but administrators, coaches, a lot of the institutional folks. And for me, just my opinion, because that's our work, we really need to get into like a contract and earn a part of that budget every single year. And to me, at least, like that's the right alignment, is that we have to prove our value to decision makers and institution year after year.
Thank you.
I'm going to pick up right on that theme. So on the kind of idea of like, if you provide value, you should be compensated for it. And if you're not provided value, you probably shouldn't be compensated for it. So our business model at Landed is, there's two parts to Landed when people talk about it. One part is the brokerage, the real estate brokerage that basically pays my salary, and we could have, we're venture backed. And then there is another part of Landed is our products, and one of those core products are Downpayment Assistance, which is separate from funding for our company. So the company makes money every time we help a home buyer, so an educator who wants to purchase a home, we help them somehow, and they partner with one of our real estate agents. That real estate agent shares in the commission they're already going to receive from the sale of that home. So instead of adding a cost to the home buyer, we just basically take some of the money that's already going to be exchanged hands, and we're basically the marketing tool for a real estate agent. So in that way, as long as we're helping more people with home ownership, we are getting paid. So the mission, one of the ways we measure whether or not we're hitting our mission is how many people are we serving. If we're serving enough more people, the business keeps growing. So that should remain in alignment. Part of the reason we chose this type of model over others, nonprofit, I mean, honestly, Jonathan, my co-founder and I, when we started, were pretty agnostic to the tax status that you needed to have in order to build a company, because that's really what it all comes down to, for-profit, nonprofit, et cetera. But we wanted one that would have the right incentives aligned and would also convince investors and other people to come on board when we were very new. And one of the challenges was that in order to make our down payment assistance actually work, there's an equity exchange. You need a lot of people to use it, and it takes a lot of money per person to offer down payment assistance. Every single person in the Bay Area who works with us is getting like $90,000. If you multiply that out by a number of educators that we're trying to serve, that's a crap ton of money. So to be able to partner with the size of institutions we needed to move that forward, we needed to have a business model that would drive our growth so that we could provide this type of down payment support. So it just seemed to match that the kind of for-profit model matched with this equity investment made a lot of sense. Happy to talk about trade-offs and whatnot, but that's basically how it works.
Thank you.
For us, we have, I guess getting started, we had kind of an interesting story too. For like Daniel, when we first were getting started, we had a lot of trouble raising venture money or large foundational fund. We were fortunate in a competitive grant that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was sponsoring, and that was some initial money. And then we got another grant from Penn's Graduate School of Education that allowed us to keep the lights on and get like a first pilot going where we could learn and get some data points back. And then we've since have raised combination of venture and social impact funding from folks like Owl Ventures, like EdTech Fund, and Redpoint, which is more a traditional VC, and folks like Chan Zuckerberg as well. And so we have a diversity of investors and backers, which I think is really nice and creates a rich discussion in our board meetings where people can bring different perspectives as well. And then in terms of our business model, we believe RaiseMe needs to be free for the students that we serve. So we try to create a model that allows for that. So it's free for any student or any educator that wants to roll it out for their student. And then colleges and universities are paying us an annual subscription to be on the platform and to be awarding scholarships to students on the platform. And the reason that they do that is because it enables them to get in front of these students much earlier in high school, help those students see that there is scholarship funding available at their school, so they'll be less scared by the sticker price, and also start to shape their incoming class. We serve a really diverse population of students, and so many college and university partners are looking to diversify their incoming student body as well, and we can help them achieve those goals.
So Remind, like any company, is a journey. And there's a number of chapters in the story, so I'll kind of go through a couple of them. The first chapter was really Brett and David coming to Palo Alto in 2011, but they'd actually kind of started banging away on this thing called Remind, or this concept called Remind, prior to that in Chicago, where they grew up. And then they came to Imagine K-12 in 2011 and really started to build a one-way text messaging tool to serve the needs of teachers. So one of our core values is to be teacher obsessed. And so that was where it started. It was very much around teachers, very anchored in the classroom experience. And it just kind of started to take off virally. So it got the attention of some investors who looked at this and do what venture investors do, which is extrapolate. And it started to grow. And so first round capital came in, and then social capital invested, and then Kleiner Perkins invested not long after that. And the focus was very much, as it should have been, and is to our benefit as an asset, around that classroom experience, that student, teacher, parent engagement that's fostered through communication. So at our core, what Remind is a two-way communication platform that fosters that meaningful relationship building that really can only happen through communication, and particularly through the communication that happens in a device that everybody has, not so much kindergarten through fourth graders. So that's teacher to parent. But once a student gets a device, they're part of that experience, and other stakeholders can be a part of it: counselors, coaches, etc. So come 2016, one of the things that Remind then started to focus on, was, well, how do we build a business? So a lot of what we were doing up until that point was very much, and still is today, impact centered. How are we impacting student success, which is our vision, giving every student an opportunity to succeed. So that classroom communication, whether it was attendance, whether it was homework completion rates, ultimately grades, a lot of that was happening through that engagement at the classroom level. But fundraising, unfortunately, is not a sustainable long-term business model. It can be, but at some point, then you need to show, how can you build a business? How can you stand on your own 2 feet? And so in 2016, we started to build a version of Remind that was then focused on customers. So students, teachers, and parents, really valuable users. That engagement is priceless. Customers are the administrators. So kind of like Daniel's business, our customers sit in the administrative suite. Many of them don't know much about Remind. They know Remind's being used. In fact, one of the most fun parts of our conversations that we have with customers is when we show them, hey, here's how Remind's being used in your community. And they literally like, wait a minute, how'd that happen? I didn't approve that. And they see 30, 40, 50% of their students, teachers, and parents actively using Remind on a daily basis. And so that then gave us the ability to go in and start to talk to customers about, well, how do you deploy this across your entire community? And that, again, back to every startup is a story with multiple chapters, gave us the ability to then continue to go raise additional rounds of capital, which we have done with some of the same investors that Preston and his team have, Al, GSV, that add to our board and add to the perspective of what we're trying to build into what will be the next chapter that we're all currently, I see some of the team here, currently writing here at Remind.
Thank you. Yeah, so what I heard a lot as a theme throughout is just building value and really using the mission to help build that value. And we're going to come back to that, to the business sustainability piece, because I'm all sure that in your individual journeys, there were things that you realized later on that you may have advice about for folks in the audience, especially some folks that are interested in building mission-driven companies. So we're going to come back to that sustainability piece. And we're going to transition a little bit outside of the individual sort of company missions and business models into working in ed tech or in an education adjacent space at large, because the marketplace is very unique, working with students, parents, teachers. So I want to hear a little bit from the extensive experiences of folks on the panel and their perspective on this space, you know, what it means to work in the education marketplace and with folks that are adjacent to it. So from your personal perspective, how has this space changed in the past 5 years? And what do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
My crystal ball is back at the desk. Can I go get my crystal ball? So, so last 5 years, what I'll say is there's been a pretty crisp focus on kind of a spectrum. So there's pre-K-12, there's higher ed, and then there's this kind of never-ending lifelong learning, retooling the workforce segment. And so I think in the last 5 years, that's really come into view. And back to the investor question, you can see different investors focusing on different segments. I'd say in those second two segments, the thing that's also happened that then from my perspective is kind of how I would think about the next 5 to 10 years is those second two segments have a little bit less what I would call kind of government regulation that are wrapped around them. And so they are arguably unbundling. So kind of what we have seen, what I experienced in my old business in media, where digital is enabling all types of new models and different companies, and a lot of what the friends to my left here and their companies do is I think going to rapidly happen or is happening to higher education and is opening up all types of companies and opportunities, many that we don't know how they're going to play out in this kind of lifelong learning, retooling the workforce end of the spectrum. I think a lot of innovation will continue to happen in K-12. And so I think we'll see that rapidly accelerate in the next 5 or 10 years because digital just kind of does what digital does. And it will enable the better delivery of content, more engagement, new models, new partnerships, right? Like everybody on this panel should be partnering with Remind and integrating with Remind. And we'll talk about that after the panel.
Everyone reads the text.
Yes. But so that's kind of my take is there's these 3 segments, 2 of which I think are kind of rapidly unbundling. The third is going to be a fast follow. And then the next 10 years, it's going to be, and it's, with healthcare, it's one of the top 2 industries in the globe on the planet. And so it's time for this category to get the focus that we're all bringing to it.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I think just the levels of broadband and device penetration in schools mean that we can really start to think about scaling impactful solutions for students and educators. So it's really exciting time to be in ed tech. What does the next 5 years hold? I don't really know. In our space, I think we're continuing to see more and more student debt, more and more questions about the ROI of college, and that's at a time where the vast majority of jobs being created require more and more education. When you think about the world getting more complex, it's more important that students continue their education than ever. So it's creating, I think, this really a big challenge, and so I think we're going to just continue to see more innovation and more different types of solutions coming out, hopefully to help tackle that.
And just as a segue, so Alex, I always tell your colleague Annie, who also works at Landed, I wish that Landed was around when I was a teacher, because home ownership, unfortunately, is still not something in my horizon yet. And so just wondering, in terms of you working predominantly with educators, what is that looking like for financial security in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I was going to say the panel up here is much more well-positioned to talk specifically about the ed tech world. But I think one thing I have noticed, and I think helped propel the work that we've been doing for the last few years, is something that's changed recently, is that there's a moment in time of political kind of will around recognizing just how dire recruiting and retention is for educators and essential workforce. I mean, it's been a conversation for a very long time. And if you work in education, you've been talking for a long time. But I think the general public is like heard it enough now and kind of realizing how dire it is. So there's a lot of inner energy in communities to bring about any solutions, whether it's for-profit side, nonprofit side, government side, to try to find solutions. So I think that wave of interest in finding solutions is something that we've caught on to. My hope is the next 5 years that continues. I think that especially because in our country, professional protections, worker protections have been constantly eroded. The innovation for kind of how to have a social safety net for the people who are doing essential work there needs to be more solutions than what was in the past, which is basically unions. And unions have been not able to achieve what they ultimately need to achieve for classroom folks specifically. And so how does innovation happen outside of the classroom when the teacher leaves the classroom? How do other products and other services come about to address that? So hopefully more of that comes.
Thank you.
That's great. I'm happy to hear that the essential work of teachers is catching on. I think that's awesome. I don't have any kind of crystal ball. That's been proven in some of the decisions I've made over the course of Goalbook. But I would say that some of this is just my own bias that you're getting of what I hope is probably going to be the future. So I actually think that when we started, there was like this kind of real huge optimism of a very tech-driven or automated-based instruction that the technology is going to be the deliverer of instruction to kids, and it's going to adapt based on the kids' needs. And my personal take is that I think that kind of is over now. And I think the next part is going to be, it seems like, is around these like unquantified or difficult to have quantified things like social emotional learning, relationships, classroom community, school climate. I think, that will probably get a lot growing attention.
Thank you. And so for a couple of the panelists, what excites you most about working in your particular industry?
For me, it's two things that get me really excited to get out of bed every morning. One is impact, hearing directly from students and educators about the impact the product the team is working on is having for students. And then second is the team we get to work with. I feel so fortunate to work in a mission-driven company that has a lot of folks from all different types of backgrounds coming together, former educators, college administrators, technologists, and to have this environment where all these people with different skills and experiences are coming together to work on a big problem is super exciting and motivating to me.
I'd say two things. I'll start with the one that he ended on, which is our team. So this panel is one team, two goals, or one company, two goals. And so for us, that aspect has been so gratifying to see. And particularly as we've added a lot of elements to the organization, particularly on the business and go-to-market side. And that's never easy when you add that to a team that might be more product and engineering focused, and to have all of that come together and be unified around, in our case, these two goals, which are impact and building a sustainable business. And then I'd say the other piece is we just get super excited about what we are building. Sometimes we describe it as Slack for education, and this concept that we're building this unique channel into education that allows students, teachers, parents, and administrators. And so to me, that's like the holy grail, is if we can bring all of those stakeholders together who today don't always talk to each other and sometimes have different kind of motivations and can be misaligned. Like we've been in presentations where we'll show the admin dashboard and an administrator might look at something that a teacher said about an upcoming strike, and they kind of react to that. And I want a world where that goes away, where the administrators, the teachers, the students, the parents, the counselors, the coaches, every stakeholder is wrapped around one single individual, and that's the student. And Remind is uniquely in a position to create that environment, and then imagine all the other content and learning information that can flow through that amongst those stakeholders. That's if you can't get out of your bed every day to come in and do something like that, then I'm not sure what would get you excited.
Thank you. So I heard a lot about, your internal teams motivating you, and then just also the folks that you serve with your products and services. So this is a perfect segue into our next topic. And being that this panel is hosted by the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion team at Remind, we're going to talk a little bit about DEI. So diversity, equity, inclusion, at least for me, are seemingly at the forefront of buzzwords that are just used in the technology space, in the education space, in the startup space. And as of the year 2014, national survey results in the United States showed that for the first time in American history, the majority of U.S. public schools, higher ed institutions are not white. And education spaces in general over time have become increasingly more female, more queer, and more inclusive of folks with disabilities. And so many companies, and we're going to dive deeper into it, are constantly reflecting on how embodying diversity positively impacts businesses, and more importantly, internally reflects the markets that we are all trying to serve. And so my next question is, how does your company approach diversity, equity, and inclusion? And how do you measure success? And I'll let anyone take the mic.
I'll start with this one. This is something that's real alive and well in our company right now. We're young. Or a young company, which is actually one of the times when it's probably the most important to get right, but have a lot to mature on when it comes to measuring and defining for ourselves. I will say from the beginning at Landed, I think we've shared a perspective that diversity is a core part of your strategy to win. It's actually a strategic strategy. It's not a Band-Aid. It's not a nice to have. It's not, because philosophically, nobody knows truth. All of us carry our own facts and our perspectives. The more diverse perspectives you have in a room, the more you can get closer to understanding what might really be going on. And so the more you can diversify your team, race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, where you come from, ability, et cetera, the better your products will be, the better your go-to-market strategies will be, et cetera. So that, I think, has helped inform. We did a process of kind of articulating our values recently, and I think that was at the heart of why our values are what they are, especially ones around humility and acting with humility, being able to come to the table knowing that you don't know everything, and inviting other perspectives in, owning your growth, being able to be pushed by things that you wouldn't believe, realize before without having a diverse perspective in the room, finding what's fair. That's a really hard concept, fairness, but trying to find it all the time is a constant process. And having people in the room who can pull you in different directions it's the right way to win. So I think that's how we've thought about it. One way that we're starting to talk, or going to be diving into defining this, is how do we reflect because we work in all about geography, kind of metro areas. How do we really try to reflect those metro areas in our team all the way through, not just race, everything else, and trying to find ways to measure all that and hold accountable every team, whether it be the leadership team and then individual teams in the company, to that same standard. Some teams are going to have a really easy time meeting that. Some teams are going to have a really hard time meeting that, but no one gets a free pass. So we're always trying to work towards it. So we'll see where that all goes, but that's where we're trying to take it.
This is something we're really passionate about at RaiseMe as well, and agree with everything Alex just shared. So we do set goals around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm a firm believer if you're not measuring it, then you don't really value it. And so we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do we measure it and how are we communicating it. For the first time this year, we're actually publicly sharing some of the data that we've been tracking as a company, and that's another way we want to try and hold ourselves accountable by publishing those data and reports. One of like our core values is be inclusive, and for many of the reasons that Alex cited, we're trying to serve a really diverse population of stakeholders. I think it's critical to build a good product that we reflect those users as much as possible. And we're proud of the fact that our students are actually more diverse than the US population overall. And that's a function of a lot of the hard work the team is doing to reach out to districts that serve underrepresented students and serve more low-income districts across the country as well. And then the other thing I would just say on it is, like, other ways we think about measuring it are it's not just about the diversity of the environment that we're creating and trying to make it a place where everyone feels they can be themselves authentically. And so how we've been trying to measure that is just through surveys and asking the team directly and anonymously about that.
Yeah, so it's a big investment for us. Kate, who's hiding around the corner, has one of two core pillars for us from a people ops standpoint is DE&I. And one of the things that we lean on a lot is how do we as an organization reflect who we serve? And so because we have such a wide spectrum of the US, we need to try and approximate and look as much like the students, the teachers, the parents, and the administrators that we serve as we possibly can. And so I would absolutely agree with Preston. The only way to get there is you have to measure it and you have to quantify it. And so we have focused on that, putting a process and reevaluating how do we recruit? How do we recruit and hire, and how do we intentionally invest in doing that? And you got to stick with it, because you're not gonna get to whatever your goals are in 1 quarter or 2 quarters or maybe even 3 or 4 years. And so you got to stick with it. That said, in 2017, 34% of our company was female, and today, as the first half of this year, 43%. 60% of the company today is Caucasian. In 2017, it was 74%. So we are actually making progress, and we want to continue to do that. And it will absolutely be one of the core pillars of this company. And for me, it wasn't something that I had to kind of be sold on or was novel. I happened to be on both of my daughters' K through 8 school board, and it was really powerful to see the head of school bring to the board meetings multiple times research about the power of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the context of outcomes for students. That more diverse environments in every aspect of a school. So the faculty, the students, the board, we had to shine a light on ourselves as a board. Were we diverse enough as a board? And the answer was no. And so our committee on trustees took it upon themselves to think about how do we reflect the diversity that we need to have so that the outcomes for the students would improve. And so that research really was eye-opening for me, and it was not a surprise when we came here and said, like, then that doesn't change when you come into a company. And it doesn't change when you come into a company in Silicon Valley. Because we're in Silicon Valley, that is not an excuse to not hold ourselves accountable to this important area.
This isn't exactly the question, but I would double, I think, what Alex said. Like, if you're starting a company or involved in a company, I think earlier, if it's important to you, the earlier you bake in a value such as this one, I think is really good. That's I think a lesson I've learned about this work is kind of in hindsight, wishing that this was more of a focus and an emphasis from the very earliest days of the company. But I would say, for me, the way I understand, see it at Goalbook is we really need difference. To me, I don't believe there's really been a national scale like curriculum and instruction company where various communities across the US can look at that work, like look at that textbook or look at that thing and really say, oh, these people get us, right? I just don't think that's ever really been true. And I think about, well, what is the team that has a chance to do that? And it doesn't look like the team we have now, but that's what we want to aspire to be. I think I've also learned through the work we've done internally that difference also means you have to be stronger. I think to me, lack of difference is kind of a form of weakness and or brittleness maybe. And you become much more stronger and resilient when you can actually embrace and bring the strength of difference. But I think that's challenging. So I'll just share a couple of things that we've done. So one is every other month we meet as a company and we break into small groups and we talk about different topics we believe that are related to diversity and inclusion. So some could be like bias in interviews or different approaches to conflict and some of the implications that could have to do with difference, whether that's race, gender, personality style. And so like surveys and evaluations from those have been really helpful just to get like a temperature check on where people are at. And then definitely in hiring and recruiting as well. And I think one of the things I've learned from this work is that I can't just sit being like, oh, yeah, I hope we build that company where we really do represent all kids and all communities. Like, really, you have to go out and get it, I think. And we have a lot to learn on how to do that better. But I would say that's kind of some of the learnings I think we've had as an organization the last 3-4 years.
Thank you. So it sounds like there's a lot of reflections on, how to improve constantly. And I heard a lot about DEI in terms of internal teams, a lot about the importance of reflecting how your internal team reflects the market that you are serving. And so I'm going to have a couple folks answer this question is, given the markets you are serving and how diverse they are, how does this inform specific product marketing or business decisions you make for your customer base?
I'll try to be quick. The product team has been doing some work and has done some audits of our content. A lot of our work is content driven. So a couple areas we looked at. What reading passages have we selected inside our product? When we have a word problem in math, what names are we using? What's the context in which the word problem is kind of showing? And so a couple years ago when we did this, we were very disappointed in what we actually found. So I can share a couple, but they won't be surprising to you that most of the passages, there was a white, most usually male protagonist was a kind of the center part of the story. And in math, this was like there was a few things, but ones are interesting. If we used what would be seen as a boy's name, then it was something like, how many cars are in the garage, or, and then if we used a girl's name or a woman's name, it'd be like, how many cookies are in the oven? And it's, I can 100% guarantee no one's trying to do that. But there we were, right? And I think it's kind of a wake-up call of like what some of the unintended consequences of some of this work is.
Thank you for sharing that example.
From our core product, the Downpayment Assistance product, is basically based off of the fact that for families who aren't able or it was illegal to build wealth, they couldn't transfer wealth between each other, so they couldn't help each other buy homes, help their kids buy homes. So that is ends up being a lot of immigrant families and a lot of Black and brown families. So a lot of the thinking about diversifying who has access is inherent to some of our products. A stat that we're pretty excited about is that on average, I think 12% of home buyers in the Bay Area are underrepresented minorities, and of our buyers, it's more representative of the actual makeup of the whole area, and broken down by Black families and Hispanic families, et cetera. So it's pretty cool to see that happen. I think what's really exciting, I'm going to give a shout out to Annie here, is our evolution of some of our work is really focused a lot on the home buyer education component, and a lot of things go beyond down payment assistance. And I think we've brought in some badass people into our company who are always pushing and having a lens to, like, you know, how is our education culturally appropriate? Is it accessible to people? Is it taking this one lens, or how are we actually making sure that we're not turning people off, that we don't mean to be turning off through our process? So I'm really excited about all of that and hoping to see great results, just like we've seen from the down payment part of what we do.
So I think, again, accessibility is kind of a key word here. And Daniel highlighted a number of areas that are important around just what you present back through your product visually, right? The type of people, the diversity there. There's three other really important areas that are central to Remind. Accessibility from how you can communicate. So not everybody in this country has a smartphone. Not everybody in this country has Wi-Fi access. So that's why we do the hard work to support SMS and text messaging in addition to our app. I'm looking at Kevin and thinking of our engineering team. I mean, they do a disproportionate amount of work on top of our core app to support millions of our users, literally millions of our users that really can only access us through SMS and text messaging. And think about the parents who can't make it to back to school night because they have to work a night shift because of that. Second, translations. So we support over 70 languages for translation through Remind. You know, it's not lost on me when I go down to Fresno and I hear, yeah, Spanish is an important language and so is Hmong, right? And every community we go to, it's 2 or 3 important languages that we have to support. And the third that we see increasingly now that we're moving up into districts is accessibility requirements for hearing impaired and, you know, visually impaired and people that need to access Remind. And so VPAT, right, becomes something in the state of Washington that's on our radar. So there's just all these permutations that, you know, diversity and accessibility have to be mindful of.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for sharing. So it sounds like a lot of thoughtfulness into reflecting back on decisions that were made and then moving forward, thinking about how to reflect DEI even more in your work. So we're going to take a segue back to the theme of tonight, which is one company and 2 goals. And so being mission driven and achieving business sustainability was the theme of tonight. And so while there may not be one answer that solves for the audience how to do that successfully, it sounds like you have all learned a lot from being in this type of work. And so I want to end this panel before we jump into question with a final question, but also a chance for you all to share your sort of words of advice and wisdom from being in this work. And it is, how do you balance your mission with business sustainability? And feel free to provide any reflections that you've had on things that you may have done differently when you first got into this.
I think this is a really tough one, and spent a lot of time starting out the company. Should we be a nonprofit? Should we be a for-profit? And ultimately, I felt for us to achieve our mission and have the scale and impact we want to have, building a sustainable, scalable business is going to be the best way to do that, so that we can scale and reach a lot of students and families, but also so that we can recruit the best talent and be able to pay them competitively. And so we've tried to work really hard to figure out a business model that marries those 2 things and aligns the incentives of our users and the students with the colleges that are paying the bills to keep the lights on. And we've evolved and iterated on like the way those partnerships are structured and how we're charging to continue to try and drive more and more alignment over the years. I think ultimately we have these two sides that we're trying to serve, but we have to choose at the end of the day that we're students first. That's why we started the company and what gets us out of bed every morning. So when we have to make those decisions, we always think about the student and their family first. So that's a little bit about how we're thinking about it, and we're definitely still learning and evolving as a company as we grow.
I'll just share two quick learnings. One is don't forget your business. And the other is it's all about sequencing. The kind of reason I say don't forget your business, I really do think that our business model aligns our mission with growing a great business. So if we're helping more educators, we're achieving our mission, and then we're growing our company. I think what you will find is when you find if you have mission orientation and you are really good at bringing in badass people, sometimes you'll get just so obsessed with your mission and focus on your mission that you forget sometimes the mechanism by which you're trying to deliver that mission, and you will not necessarily be as focused on the mechanics of the business, like the metrics around the business, as much as you will about your mission. And so I think just making sure that, especially bringing people who aren't used to working in a business, you're bringing that rigor from the business perspective, just like you would from the impact perspective, and wrapping it all together. Because we can be really rigorous on one, but like forget that there's mechanics of business we need to pay attention to. So I think that's like, just don't forget that. The other one, it's all about sequencing. This is related to our down payment product. So again, I kind of explained that that's different than the brokerage we are. To ultimately, what we do, how that works is if you want a down payment, or if you need 20% down payment, you can't come up with it all. You can get some of it from us, and say you get half of it from us, so 10% of the down payment. In the future, you share in either 25% of the change in value of the home. So 25% if it goes up, 25% if it goes down is shared by Landed. So it's not a loan, and it actually is a shared investment. And we've worked really hard to figure out what's a fair way to do that wasn't as bad as a lot of other products that had come before and were on the market already, and unfair to the home buyer. But to get investors initially, in real estate investors or the kind of investors we need to have come on board, like pension funds, they had no way of working with us. Who were we? Some random people with an idea. They didn't trust us. So we had to go find some people who got the vision for who were trying to serve, what this was, to kind of take on the risk capital, to take on the risk, to have the risk tolerance, so they didn't have to charge us for that. And those were foundations. Those were family offices. Those were people who really understood the impact that we're trying to make. And they're helping us prove the model so that we can attract the type of investors we need, the pension funds of the world, the teacher pension funds of the world, to come help us expand. So just you can find, it takes a village. Just find the right village members to help you at the right time to kind of build your business up. It can be effective.
I think the ideal state, at least the way I think about it, is you want those things to align, how your business, how the company makes revenue, and as was shared before, like that is represents the execution of your vision. So for us, what I've been trying to do more, and what we as a company trying to do more, is to cast the different activities we do as a business and connect them to our mission. So the first part of our mission is around empowering educators. We don't get our product to educators unless we sell to that district. That's how we get to work with a new set of teachers and a new set of students that those teachers teach. Transform instruction. Instruction doesn't transform overnight. We don't get a chance to do that unless we have a long-term relationship with that district, which means we need to renew year after year after year. And all students succeed. We may have a product that administrators love and it demos really well, but if teachers don't actually use it in their classroom, we're not going to actually impact students. And there's been, unfortunately, products out there that have been done really well sales-wise, but may not have actually fulfilled their vision in the classroom. So we don't want to be one of those. So I think alignment, is something that I feel really thankful for in the company that we have. I think some of the more difficult things that I struggled with personally was coming out of the public school system was like, what does it mean to make a profit when, 99.9% of our revenues is the US public K-12 school system? And what does that mean? And I think I'm at peace with it now. I think what I've learned is that there are certain things that I believe, at least, the public school system just has a really difficult time doing. It's not because of lack of will or competence or intent. Just structurally, it's very difficult. So, for example, like we can bring an occupational therapist, a school psychologist, a general educator, a special educator. We can bring them together and have them look and work on a piece of content together. I challenge any district to do that consistently. It's just really difficult for some reason. And we have the ability to be able to convene that group anytime we want and have them produce work that can benefit for the school system. So I think I've learned that there's a role for us to play. The question is just, are we playing that role well? Right? Are we actually using it for something that helps the school system?
Thank you. You want to close it out, this question? Yeah.
So I guess my advice wrapped around this is don't let it be a false choice. So it's not either or. It's not impact or build a business. It's both, but it does start with impact. And for us, it's every student succeeds. And so that drives this notion of, well, we can't get to that definition of impact and our ultimate vision if we don't build a sustainable business. One of the things that's been really helpful in terms of bringing those two together is that when we secure a relationship with a district, one of the things that comes as part of our paid product is an integration with their school information system that then takes them from, again, 30, 40% using us organically on the free product to 100% of the community. And so we typically see a 4x in engagement when we secure a customer. And so that business building de facto actually drives bigger and more impactful impact at that district and for all those schools and every stakeholder in that community. And if we didn't go down that path, unless the Gates Foundation or some magical amount of money came every single year that allowed us to go do it for free, we wouldn't achieve our vision. We would not get there. And so that's why it's been so powerful to have these two really intertwined and see that to reach that ultimate impact, we need to build a sustainable business that allows us to have more and more impact in K-12, then to go to higher ed, and then to go international, and then to open up the platform to all these other third-party learning services. And so it goes.
But can I be the first person to go international on the team? No, I'm just kidding. Taking my chances. So I'm sure that you
Not to Greenland, though.
Not to Greenland, no. So I'm sure you all learned a lot, got a lot of insights from our panelists. And if you're like me, or if you're not like me, I came from almost 10 years working in the nonprofit and school space into a business. And so it was very shocking to have these sort of realizations, like how do we stay sustainable, but am I still a good person? I am still a good person.
She's a great person.
So with that being said, I want to open it up to questions from the audience. And please, when you ask, so we have a cube. The cube. It is soft, so it won't hurt you if it hits you. But we want to open it up to some questions. Please feel free to direct them if you would like to a particular panelist. You can keep them open. We do ask that you tell us your name, where you work, so we kind of know who you are. So we'll open it up, and we will pass the cube.
Hi, I'm Jenny. I work at Coursera. I'm a product manager and a former teacher. So thank you all for being here today on this great topic. I wanted to ask if, I'm curious if any of you have considered a B Corp. And if you've talked about it with investors or other colleagues, and sort of what's everyone's perspective on sort of making it official that you have two masters, profit and your mission, instead of just relying on, nice people who happen to lead the company and believe that that's the right thing to do.
So just to paraphrase that for the audience and for the recording, the question is, have any of the panelists considered a B Corp? And so I'll leave that open.
Yeah, I can start. So I have the mic. Not formally, we have discussed it in my time here. I can't represent whether it was discussed before I got here. At this stage, it's not impossible, but it's more challenging given our stage. I would say that it's something that you should be thinking about at the earliest stage and almost kind of decide, are you going to form yourself, as Preston said, as a nonprofit or for-profit or as a B Corp, and what are the pluses and minuses of each? Because I definitely see the pluses. That said, I think, and we're demonstrating, I think everybody on the panel is demonstrating that their companies can actually, in a corporate structure, still achieve impact and building a business that, coexist. But it's a good question.
We've looked at it and we haven't made the move yet, but we do take the annual Gears assessment, which is part of the assessment that's done for all B Corps every year, and then we share that with the board and other supporters as well. So we're trying to hold ourselves accountable to do a lot of the same goals, but we're still trying to figure out if it would work for us as a company.
We should do that. I think we haven't done the assessment ourselves. We've talked a lot about it. So I'm personally a big fan of B Corp. I'm really excited about Patagonia just as a company because it's one of the biggest companies that's trying to prove that you can really be successful. So we talked a lot about it. Part of the reason we decided not to do it in the early stages was a need to be as vanilla as possible when it came to how we were financed, because we were going to be raising money from a lot of different types of, it wasn't just one type of investor, because we were doing a lot of fundraising on the real estate side, and any more innovation than we were already doing was a non-starter in conversations. I think it's very true. It's really hard to do it later. I have a friend who runs a benefit corporation that successfully converted to one as a really relatively large company, but it's very, very difficult. But I think you can do it if you build a great business and prove yourself, because then you have weight in the room to push around. If you can't do that, then it is about the culture that you build and the products that you build, so that if you do that well, no one's going to mess with that, because it's a winning formula. So if you're an investor, you already want that to succeed. Good investors aren't going to mess with that. So we see it as incumbent upon us to just build that into the DNA of the company. It's about all the control we have right now to do that.
So we're going to I was just informed by my timekeeper, we're going to take one more question. So thank you for answering that. And after this question, we will have open time. So you will have time to speak to people individually afterwards and meet folks, but we'll take one more for the panel.
Yeah, I'm Sarah. I work at High School with a special education. My question is, what percentage of former educators do you hire, and what sort of value do you put on hiring former educators?
Love this question, personally. Not that my opinion matters here. But just to reiterate for the folks in the room, so what percentage of former educators do you hire in your company, or how do you go about thinking about incorporating them into your company?
Can I clarify, do you mean educators that apply, what percentage do we hire, or do you mean what percentage of the team are educators?
I suppose I was asking for what percentage of the team.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm interested.
So our work is very instructionally focused. So it's a really important attribute for most of the positions at Goalbook. So Perva can correct me if I'm wrong, but I actually did this tally last night. I think we're about 80% of our team is former public school teachers. And most of our positions, it's a requirement that there's been some experience in the US public K-12 school system. That's partly a function, I think, of the kind of work we do as well.
I should know the stat, but I don't. It's high. It's very important for us to have educators a part of what we do. I will be honest, there's a bit of me that's always torn about that too, because we are all about trying to retain talent in the classroom. But we're also not anti what people want to do in their life and had career changes. And so we definitely take advantage of that. But it's a super core to being successful is being able to relate to our customer. Everything is about being able to relate to our customer. And if you're not an educator or don't have educators closely around you, you're not going to be able to do that.
I don't know either. Unfortunately, I'm really eager to go find out though. Intuitively, I think it's really high. Because we're a mission-driven company, and that's a lot of the people that are interested in working with us. Yeah, I need to find out.
Okay. It's really high. It's really high, and it kind of depends on the group. So like our success team, it's very high, maybe less so in engineering. But one kind of story I'll tell that actually kind of ties back to the one team, two goals is when we made the decision 3 years ago to start to build this enterprise version of Remind and go into the market with that. We had 4 individuals that were what we called community operations folks. And so they were in the market, but working with districts to just try and onboard districts to our free product at the time. And when we made the decision, we're going to now build this enterprise version, we went to them and said, congratulations, you're our sales force. And so the 3 of the 4, I can't remember Laura's background off the top of my head. She may have had an education background.
Was, yeah.
Okay, so 4 of the 4 had education backgrounds, teachers working in schools, and they went into basically becoming sales representatives for our enterprise product. All 4 of them are still to this day in the field selling Remind's enterprise product and doing a fabulous job. So I think that's like a super, I love telling that story because they had never even thought about being a salesperson. They came out of the classroom. They were really focused on our free product, but they understood the importance of us building a sustainable business so that they could help deliver the impact that they came here for, before we had a business model.
Thank you for asking that final question. And so we want to add one more word. Okay.
But if you are looking for a job, we are looking for a lot of jobs right now. So let me know or go to our website.
Now it's plug time. So before I pass it off to Nancy, who I want to say is my colleague, my friend. I'm lucky I get to work with friends. And she helped plan this entire event and brought everyone here tonight. So really quick round of applause for Nancy. She's so embarrassed right now, but... and so before I pass it to her to wrap this up, I want to thank all of our panelists. And I think, the theme tonight, one team, two goals, so mission and sustainability. But at the core, you can see that everyone sitting here is committed in some way to supporting educators in whatever way that may be. And to me, that's very inspiring as a former educator. And so I want to thank you for that. So I'm going to pass it off to Nancy to wrap us up.
Thank you, Leanne. And yeah, she was saying this, what I was going to say, round of applause for the panelists. No, it's good. I'm very grateful for them to be here. Personally, I like learning by going to these types of events, and it's inspiring to hear people putting in the hard work. And sometimes when you're doing in the grind and you're like, why this is so difficult? I could be trying to make more money or trying to do something. It's just it's fun to learn from others and to be inspired to keep going and pursuing your vision and doing good for the world. So I hope that you guys were inspired tonight. And yeah, please stay. We have the space open till 8:30, so you can network, share your stories, talk with the panelists that are still going to be here, because some of them probably have to be with their families too. So yeah, again, thank you guys so much for coming. Enjoy the food and drink that's left, and hope to see you at the next event. Yeah, thank you.